Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. Before I delve into what I consider is the darkest group of people to surround Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich next week, I wanted to continue on with our stories of heroism from the World War II time frame. Last week we did the tank maiden of the Soviet Union, and today we're going to talk about 5 ordinary people that saved the lives of hundreds of Jews and other put upon people that were literally being sent to their deaths. One of the biggest questions I get is, Tracy, how could ordinary Germans and ordinary Europeans just sit around and have this stuff happen? Well, not all of them did. Just like in every conflict, there are unsung heroes, and we're going to talk about 5 of them today. The first one up is Corrie Tinboom. She was a Dutch watchmaker. That was honestly very unusual for that time, as women were often relegated to either homemaker. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm always just talking in the setting of the time. I'm not making any opinions on. I think women that want to raise children and stay at home are among the best of us. And so I never want anything to be taken. And women that want to have a career can also be among the best of us. But that was very rare. For women in 1930s and 40s Europe to engage into actual careers was very unusual. And she followed in the footsteps of her father, who owned a watch shop in Haarlem in the Netherlands, in becoming a licensed Dutch watchmaker. And then in May 1940, the Nazis invaded the Netherlands. And that is where Corrie decided to take action, as she saw so many of her Jewish friends and neighbors disappear and be shipped off to parts unknown. When talking with some of her Jewish friends, and after that, she would also write in her diary the hiding place, that when she was visiting some of her Jewish friends, that any knock at the door would send the entire family into panic. Can you imagine? There were trucks leaving, trains leaving, and everybody now kind of knew what the Nazis weren't talking about, where these Jews were going. Next week, we're going to talk about the architect of the final solution, as well as the death teams he used. And by this time, everybody knew that these people were not just being deported to any nation that would have them. They were not being sent to Madagascar. They were not being sent to the Middle East. They were being killed. And so her and her family decided to help the Jews that they knew by hiding them in a hole in their wall for the remainder of the time the Netherlands was a conquered nation. Basically, in her own bedroom, they cut out a portion of the wall, put a false wall around it, and it was a very tiny hiding place where they hid upwards of 800 Jewish refugees. However, they were found out. The Gestapo was tipped off by an informant. Now, at this point, by 1944, when they were actually found out, there were absolute narcs among the people. Everything from Jews to gypsies to regular citizens would turn in friends and neighbors they thought were hiding Jews, because the Nazis promised wealth, money, position, and protection. This was particularly true among the members of the Jewish councils in many of these cities. These were actual Jewish people that would turn in other Jewish people to save their own lives. And there are 2 sides to that. I'm not going to demonize any of them, but the Booms were turned in February 1944 by one of these informants, and they raided her home and arrested Corrie, her sister Betsy, and their elderly father, Casper. They did search the house, but they did not find any of the refugees, because they had already been smuggled out through a series of basically an underground railroad into neutral Switzerland. They were thrown in prison. Her father, who was 84 at the time, died after 10 days behind a Gestapo jail cell. And both Corrie and Betsy were sent to concentration camps. Not death camps, but concentration camps where they were held as prisoners of the state. And Betsy actually died in one of these concentration camps. Corrie was released at the end of 1944 due to a mistake on a transfer form. Basically, someone else was supposed to be transferred out, but somehow her name ended up there, and she was able to get out due to a clerical error. She did narrowly avoid death because they had sent her there to work her to death. And concentration camps or work camps, even though you weren't sent immediately to the gas chamber, the whole thing was sent to work you, to be, to make things that were useful to the Third Reich, and then to let you die slowly of starvation. After the war, she basically returned to the Netherlands, set up a rehabilitation camp, began helping the very people that she had lost her family and almost lost her life to help. And she was inspired by her sister's dying words about the power of God that said God would avenge them all. She is remembered in the Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel as a righteous among the nations and a non-Jewish Jewish saint. Pual Grer was a Swiss border commander that dedicated his life by the late 1930s into the 1940s to helping Jewish refugees into Switzerland. Before the Nazis revealed their master plan of eliminating all of Europe's Jews, they were simply sending them out of Germany and Austria, any place that would take them. Just get them out of here and we'll deal with them later. When their master plan of now eliminating all of these Jews was heard, it really started to change the opinions of a lot of non-Germans. But Grüninger was a former soldier and a longtime policeman. He had literally made a career out of following the law, but he decided to disobey the Swiss order that Jews should be turned away because they did not want to make themselves an invasion mark for Germany. So you understand they had a fear, and they felt the more Jews they took, the more likely Hitler was to invade them to eliminate all of Europe's Jews. But from 1938 to 1939, Grüninger falsified 3,600 Jewish refugees' passports by allowing them to evade detection as Jews and enter Switzerland. He was once said that he would rather die than send these poor people back into Germany. He is said to have bought shoes and paid for dental appointments for several children. But eventually Swiss officials became suspicious, and he was basically fired from his post and found guilty of breaking the law. Saddled with a criminal record, he was stripped of his Swiss government pension. However, despite that, he never regretted what he had done. "I'm not ashamed of the court's verdict," he said in 1954. "I am proud to have saved the lives of hundreds of oppressed people. My personal well-being, measured against the cruel fates of thousands, was so insignificant and unimportant that I never even took it into consideration." And if we could all be like that. Irina Sindler, a Polish woman who worked for the Polish welfare services, learned from her father that when someone is drowning, you don't ask if they can swim, you just jump in and help. And she took that motif when she helped falsify documents for over 2,000 Jewish children to keep them from being eliminated. That is what she started out doing. And she and fellow colleagues basically made Jews non-Jews to save them. But she also did more. Shortly before the German invasion of Poland, he basically sneaking into the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw, where a lot of the Jewish community had been sequestered just after the German invasion, and she brought food, medicine, and clothing to the desperate people inside. She began then smuggling small children and babies out of there, would give them new documents and allow them to live their lives in Poland as non-Jews, also found families for them, or placed them into the Polish welfare system. She said, even though this seemed very, very wrong to basically make Jews non-Jews, it was to save their life. She gave them Christian names and basically was able to keep track of all of them so that she could hopefully return them to her families once this mess was over. The Nazis did finally catch up to her. She refused to reveal the names of the people that had helped her or the families that had adopted these children. She destroyed the list, at least all the copies that she knew the Nazis could get, and remained silent even after the Nazis brutally tortured her. She was sentenced to death, but a last-minute bribe from a friend of hers got her released. And she, like many others, contributed to the saving of an entire race of people. She was also made one of Israel's non-Jewish saints, righteous among the nations, in 1965. In May 1939, the ship St. Louis left Hamburg, Germany, en route to the Americas. On this boat, commanded by Captain Gustaf Schroeder, a German sea captain, were over 900 Jewish refugees trying to get to North America. Families of these Jewish people from other continents had paid thousands of dollars in today's money to secure a visa from the Cuban embassy in Berlin. The Cubans were taking bribes at the time, and they basically paid for a falsification of documents and then a boat to get them to North America. Gustaf Schroeder was the captain that was given that duty, and he paid special care to his Jewish passengers. He had his crew treat them as well as if they were on a cruise ship. He set up rooms for their religious services, and he was able to get them from Europe to Cuba without a whole lot of trouble. Even though in Cuba they were often, not treated as well as they should have in Havana, but for 7 days, Schroeder remained there and argued with the Cuban officials to allow these people to leave and go to America, and then agreed to allow him to sail them to Florida. But then the United States, wanting to have a neutral policy, decided not to accept them either. So he was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with over 900 people on a boat with nowhere to take them. They were just basically telling him, take them back to Germany, which was instant death for them. But he managed to, over radio, to negotiate with Belgium, British, and French officials, who finally agreed to split the refugees between them. And he then sailed them back to Europe, to these safe countries. And he is also enshrined in Israel's righteous among the nations. Japanese Consulate to Lithuania, Chuing Sangarha, knew that he was facing a humanitarian crisis. Thousands of Jews were pouring into Lithuania as the Nazis swept over Eastern Europe. And he realized he had to help these people. He could not send them now anywhere in Europe because they would be in just as much danger as if they had stayed in Germany. So he came up with a plan. He started issuing Japanese transit visas and putting these people on trains through Siberia to Japan, even though the Japanese government ordered him not to. But he was able, with the help of his wife, to come up with 300 visas per day. And this is in 1 month in 1940. And he was able to get over 2,000 Jewish citizens out of Lithuania to Japan. After he himself was captured, once the Nazis invaded Lithuania, and he was held as a prisoner of war for a couple of years. After the war, he was sent back to Japan after Japan's defeat, and was stripped of his government pension for doing what he did. However, he never wavered. He said with tears that he couldn't help but sympathize with them, and he just could not complain about his future, which was so much more sure than theirs, and he did not regret what he did. And that, my friends, 5 unsung heroes that helped preserve an entire civilization. And until next time, keep on grinding.